couldn't believe it. After years of raising my sister's kids like they were my own, she laughed in my face and called me her free nanny. That's the moment I decided she'd regret ever using me. From the time I turned 13, my life stopped belonging to me. While my friends spent weekends at the mall or laughing during sleepovers, I spent mine running after screaming toddlers, cleaning up spilled juice, and listening to cartoons on repeat. My parents always told me, "You're so good with children." "Emily, it's just for a little while." "Dear." But a little while stretched into months, then years, until my entire teenage life vanished under piles of dirty diapers and baby bottles. I was never asked if I wanted to babysit. I was told. Every time I protested, my parents would guilt-trip me with lines like, "You're part of this family. Everyone has to help." Or worse, "We trusted you because you're responsible." I learned early that saying no wasn't an option. By the time I turned 16, I had become the default caretaker for every child in the extended family. My cousins would drop their kids off, neighbors would call my mother for just a few hours, and she'd volunteer me before even asking. My weekends vanished. My evenings disappeared. Sometimes I'd sit by the window, watching my classmates walking together, laughing, holding ice cream cones, free. I envied them, their freedom, their youth, their choices. Mine had been quietly stolen under the name of helping the family. My older sister Rachel was the shining star of our family. She was beautiful, charming, and constantly praised by my parents. She got into college easily, received all the financial help I was denied, and lived as though the world existed to please her. When she had her first child at 23, my parents celebrated it as if it were their own achievement. I still remember my mother saying, "Rachel's going to need your help, Emily. You're so good with kids. This will be perfect for you. Perfect for me." As if my life had no other purpose. At first, I convinced myself that it was temporary. I loved my little niece. She was sweet and curious. I told myself this was a family duty, that my sister needed time to adjust. But months turned into years, and another baby came along. By then, I was working part-time to save for college. Yet almost every evening after work, I was ordered, never asked, to go to Rachel's house. She and her husband would dress up, leave for parties, dinners, or important outings. And I'd be left to feed, bathe, and put the kids to bed. She'd return after midnight, perfume lingering in the air, thanking me with a quick smile and a casual, "You're a lifesaver, M." Sometimes she didn't even pay me back for the food I bought for her children. When I complained to my parents, they turned it around. "Rachel's working so hard," my father said. "She needs support. You should be proud of helping her succeed." Proud? I was exhausted, broke, and invisible. My friends stopped inviting me to outings because I always had to cancel. I began missing work shifts because Rachel would call at the last minute, sobbing about being overwhelmed. Every time I tried to refuse, my mother's voice would slice through me like a knife. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" That guilt was powerful. It chained me tighter than any rope could. Years passed like this. Routine, suffocating, predictable. I'd go to work, come home tired, get a call from Rachel, and spend my nights babysitting. My savings disappeared because I kept spending on her kids. My dreams of going to design school faded into the background like an old photograph. Still, I endured it because I didn't know what else to do. I'd been trained to believe that sacrifice was love, and obedience was gratitude. But one night changed everything. Rachel had gone out again, leaving me with the kids. After tucking them in, I walked into the kitchen to grab a drink, and that's when I heard her voice from the living room. She was on a phone call, laughing loudly. "I swear I'm so lucky," she said. "Most people have to pay a fortune for a nanny, and I've got one living nearby who does it for free. Emily's too soft to ever say no." Her laughter echoed through the room, and my chest tightened. The world blurred for a second. I felt dizzy, like I'd been punched in the stomach. She didn't see me as her sister, her family, or even a person. I was just free labor, someone she could manipulate, guilt, and use. I quietly walked back to the kids' room, stood beside their beds, and looked at their peaceful faces. They were innocent, but their mother wasn't. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not in anger, but in clarity. I finally saw the truth. They never loved me for who I was. They loved what I did for them. My parents, Rachel, they all valued me for my usefulness. Every praise, every compliment about being responsible was just a way to keep me compliant. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at the walls, replaying years of memories. Birthdays I missed, opportunities I declined, the quiet resentment that had built up like dust in a forgotten room. By dawn, my decision was made. I wasn't going to be their servant anymore. I started small, keeping my plans quiet. I began researching scholarships, programs, and low-cost colleges out of town. I learned to say no, little by little. I told Rachel I had extra shifts at work, even when I didn't. I pretended to be busy, pretended to be sick, pretended not to hear the phone. It felt strange at first, disobedience wrapped in guilt, but it was freeing too. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing up for myself, even if only in secret. Still, every time I looked at my family, the weight of the past years pressed down on me. My mother's eyes carried disappointment. My father's silence carried disapproval. And Rachel's manipulative sweetness made my skin crawl. They thought they owned me, but soon they were going to learn the truth. They had turned me into their permanent babysitter, their reliable backup plan. But I was done being their shadow. I had given them my youth, my peace, my dreams. Now, it was time to take my life back. And though they didn't know it yet, the girl who once obeyed every command was about to disappear forever. That night, as I walked home under the streetlights, the cool air brushing my face, I made myself a silent promise. This ends with me. I didn't know how or when, but I knew it would. My revenge wouldn't be loud or cruel. It would be freedom itself. Because nothing would hurt them more than realizing I was gone. For good. The first few weeks after I decided to distance myself from my family felt strange. Quiet but powerful. For years I had lived by their schedule, jumping at every call, every guilt-soaked plea. Now, when the phone rang and Rachel's name flashed on the screen, I stared at it until it stopped buzzing. At first, the silence afterward felt heavy, like I had broken an invisible law. But soon that silence began to feel like oxygen, something I hadn't truly breathed in years. I started saying no. When my mother called asking if I could watch Rachel's kids just for tonight, I said I had a work deadline. When Rachel texted, begging for help because she really needed a break, I replied that I wasn't feeling well. The excuses were small lies, but each one loosened the chains around my life. And to my surprise, the world didn't fall apart. Rachel didn't show up with the kids at my doorstep. My parents didn't disown me. Life just went on. But for Rachel, things started to unravel. She'd never had to juggle her life without me before. She started arriving late to her job, calling my mother in tears because the babysitter she had hired canceled last minute. My parents called me, lecturing that I was being cold and selfish. I just listened calmly, pretending I was too busy to talk. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't revenge yet, but it was the beginning of it. I threw myself into something I had long given up on, my dream of studying design. Every night after work, I stayed up late researching scholarships, affordable programs, and cities where I could start fresh. I applied to a design institute in another city under my own name, but listed a friend's address as my contact, just to make sure no one from my family intercepted the acceptance letter. It felt sneaky but necessary. I was tired of them knowing every move I made. Months passed, and I slowly built a double life. On the surface, I was still the dutiful daughter who occasionally helped out when she could, but behind that facade, I was saving money, selling some of my old belongings online, and building a quiet exit strategy. I opened a separate savings account under my own name, something my parents didn't know existed. Every paycheck I funneled a small amount into it. It wasn't much, but it was freedom accumulating in slow drops. Rachel's dependence grew desperate. One day, she showed up at my apartment uninvited, 2 kids clinging to her legs, her hair a mess, eyes rimmed with red. "Emily, please," she begged. "I have a charity gala tonight and my babysitter just canceled. You're the only one I trust." For years, I would have melted at those words, but now I looked at her and saw manipulation, not love. I smiled politely and said, "Sorry, Rachel, I can't. I already have plans." She blinked, shocked, as if I had spoken in another language. "Plans?" she repeated. "What could be more important than helping your family?" I shrugged and closed the door gently, leaving her standing in the hallway. Inside, I leaned against the door, heart pounding, and realized something profound. Saying no felt powerful. By the end of that year, I received my acceptance letter to the Design Institute. I stared at the words until tears blurred my vision. Finally, a doorway out. I didn't tell a soul. Not my parents, not Rachel, not anyone. I knew if I did, they'd find a way to sabotage it or guilt me into staying. So I quietly started packing, one box at a time, removing pieces of myself from that life while pretending nothing had changed. Then came the perfect opportunity. One Friday evening, Rachel called, sounding breathless. "James and I are going away for the weekend. I really need you to stay with the kids," she said. When I hesitated, she added sharply, "Mom said you're free. Don't be difficult." Moments later, my mother called too, her voice layered with disappointment. "Emily, she's your sister. You can help for 2 days. Stop being selfish." Their words used to crush me, but this time I felt strangely calm. I agreed, but for reasons they would never expect. That weekend, I arrived at Rachel's house with a polite smile. She looked relieved, rushing out the door with her husband. "You're a lifesaver, Em," she said. I watched her drive away, the taillights fading into the night, and I whispered to myself, "Not anymore." The kids were sweet, innocent, and I cared for them lovingly. None of this was their fault. I cooked their meals, helped them with bedtime stories, and kissed their foreheads goodnight. But inside, I knew what I was about to do would change everything. On Sunday night, after the kids were asleep, I wrote a letter. It wasn't emotional or dramatic. It was factual, deliberate. I folded it neatly and placed it on my parents' kitchen table early Monday morning before leaving town. It said, "For 10 years you made me your servant. You took my kindness for weakness and called it love. From now on, I'm living for myself. Don't call me again." By the time Rachel returned from her weekend trip, my apartment was empty. My phone number had been disconnected, my social media wiped clean. I left no trace behind. When she called my parents, they panicked, then realized they couldn't reach me either. My mother cried for days, telling everyone I'd abandoned the family. Rachel sent angry emails, calling me ungrateful and heartless. I didn't read past the first few lines. I was already gone. I arrived in the city with nothing but 2 suitcases, my savings, and my dream. It wasn't easy at first. The rent was high, classes were demanding, and loneliness crept in at night. But even with the struggle, I felt lighter than ever. I woke up each morning knowing my time, my choices, my life finally belonged to me. I got a part-time job at a design studio where my manager saw potential in my work. For the first time, someone valued me for what I could create, not what I could do for them. Months turned into a year. My family eventually stopped calling. Rachel, however, sent one last message through an old friend. She accused me of betraying her, of being ungrateful after everything she'd done. I laughed when I read it. I realized she truly didn't understand. She thought love was control, that giving me chores and responsibilities counted as care. But I wasn't the same Emily anymore. For years, my revenge had been only a fantasy, but now it was real, and it wasn't loud or cruel. It was peaceful, quiet, and permanent. My revenge was living the life they never allowed me to have. My revenge was freedom. 2 years passed before I heard from my family again. By then, I had built an entirely new life, one that didn't revolve around anyone else's needs or expectations. I had completed my design program and was now running my own small but growing studio. It wasn't glamorous at first. I started from a tiny rented office space with old furniture and secondhand tools, but it was mine. Every sketch, every client, every success carried the satisfaction of being earned on my own terms. I had friends who respected me, colleagues who valued my creativity, and for the first time in my life, I felt alive. Not just existing, but truly living. The ghosts of my past still followed me sometimes, especially at night when I thought about how easily they had used me. But instead of bitterness, I used that memory as fuel, to work harder, to build stronger, and to prove that I could thrive without them. Then, One rainy afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Rachel. The text was long and frantic, filled with apologies and desperation. She said her husband had left her, taking their savings with him. She said she was drowning. 2 kids, a mortgage, and no one to help. "I know I don't deserve it," she wrote, "but please, Emily, I need you." I stared at the message for a long time, my heart caught between pity and anger. For years, she had treated me as a tool, someone to use when convenient and discard when not. Now she was the one in need. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't reply. I simply put my phone down and went back to my sketches. Over the following months, the messages kept coming. Sometimes she begged, sometimes she tried guilt, and sometimes she lashed out, accusing me of being heartless. My mother even called, her voice trembling. "Emily, you've made your point," she said. "Your sister is suffering. Can't you let go of the past?" I wanted to laugh. Let go? That was all I'd ever done. Let go of dreams, let go of chances, let go of myself for them. I told her calmly, "Mom, I already forgave you all. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'll go back." There was silence on the other end before she hung up. I felt no guilt this time. Only peace. Time passed. My studio grew. I hired employees, expanded into home interiors, and slowly gained recognition. I was featured in a local magazine and my name started appearing on design forums. It wasn't about fame, it was about independence. Every time I saw my name printed next to my work, I felt like I was reclaiming the years they had taken from me. Then one morning, my secretary buzzed through the intercom, her voice uncertain. "Emily, there's someone here to see you. She says her name is Rachel." For a moment, I froze. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in over a year. When Rachel walked into my office, I barely recognized her. The confident, glamorous sister who used to brag about her perfect family was gone. In her place stood a tired woman with dark circles under her eyes and hands that trembled slightly as she clutched her purse. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair unkempt, her voice soft. "Emily," she whispered, "you look amazing." I gestured for her to sit, keeping my tone professional. "What brings you here, Rachel?" She took a shaky breath. "I need a job, any job. I can't make ends meet. The kids are in school and I've been rejected everywhere. I know I hurt you and I don't expect forgiveness, but please, I just need a chance." For a long moment, I said nothing. I studied her face. The same woman who once mocked me for being too serious, who laughed about having a free babysitter, who called me ungrateful when I tried to reclaim my life. And yet, in front of me now was not my old tormentor but a broken person, stripped of her pride. Finally, I said, "I can offer you an assistant position. It's not glamorous and it pays modestly, but it's honest work." Her eyes filled with tears. "Anything," she said. "I'll do anything." And so she began working for me. Watching Rachel as my assistant felt like watching a mirror of our past. But this time, the roles were reversed. She fetched coffee, ran errands, and scheduled client meetings, often staying late to organize documents or clean up after events. At first, she seemed embarrassed, unable to meet my eyes, but I treated her fairly, never cruelly. If anything, I was more professional with her than anyone else. I didn't need to humiliate her. Life had already done that for me. Still, it was impossible not to notice the poetic justice of it all. She, who had once ordered me around without gratitude, was now learning what it meant to serve others. Karma wasn't always loud. It was often patient and quiet, like time itself balancing the scales. There were moments when she'd pause by my office door and look at me as if wanting to say something, but she never did, and I didn't push. Some apologies don't need words. Life itself becomes the apology. Months later, during one late evening at the office, she approached me as I packed my things. "Emily," she said softly, "I don't know how to thank you. I know what I did to you was unforgivable, but I see now what I made you go through. I was selfish. I thought you'd always be there, like you owed me something, but you didn't. You were just kind, and I abused that." Her voice broke, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. I nodded slowly. "That's the problem, Rachel," I said. "You never saw me as a person with dreams, just a convenience." She didn't argue. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You're right," she whispered. "But thank you for giving me this chance anyway." I smiled faintly, gathering my bag. Everyone deserves a chance to change. Just don't waste it. Then I left, stepping out into the cool night air. As I walked through the city lights, the weight I had carried for years finally began to lift. My revenge had never been about hurting Rachel. It had been about reclaiming my life, my time, my dignity. She was learning her lessons, and I had already moved on. Watching her find humility was not cruel satisfaction, it was closure. The years of forced babysitting had stolen my youth, but they had also forged my strength. I had learned patience, discipline, and resilience from the very people who tried to keep me small. Standing there under the city sky, I realized something powerful. My revenge was not in their suffering, it was in my peace. When I returned to my office the next morning, I saw Rachel quietly cleaning her desk, focused, respectful, and humble. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt understanding. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. And I had transformed completely, from their obedient caretaker into a woman who finally owned her own story.